So the Swamp Kings documentary, 4 parts, have dropped on Netflix. It chronicles the mid to late 2000s Florida teams under Urban Meyer. I watched episode 1 right next to producer Jesse because it carries a TVMA rating, so he needed parental guidance. So I watched along with producer Jesse, and I got some thoughts. I'm not spoiling things for you, but if you think that you can't trust me and I'm going to spoil it for you, I don't know, read the comments if you're watching the replay and see if I did. So I'll tell you what this brought back such vivid memories of. The hire of Urban Meyer, when they brought him in from Utah, you've got Urban on camera. I told you guys, cast and creative are the keys in docs. Cast, who can you get on the record to talk? They got Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow and those guys on the record, so that's all well and good. And the creative, what are you allowed to show? That remains to be seen because I'm only through episode 1. I know that it takes some twists and turns down there over the years, but when Urban Meyer came into the SEC, there was a way of doing things down here. It had been done the same way for a long time with, just small little minor adjustments here and there, but there was SEC football. And then a guy from Utah comes in and everyone thinks that the SEC is about to teach him a lesson. And the way your mind remembers it is Urban Meyer just came in and dominated. Eventually he did. That first year, he did not. That first year went pretty sideways. And what it emphasized to me so much is we all know how it ended up. He went 65-15 there, won a couple of national championships, had 5 top 5 finishes. And yet you look back and you listen to him and others tell the story about the pressure and the criticism he had in year 1. That stuff's so stupid to me sometimes. You can't change reality. Okay, reality is what it is. Norvell's dealt with it at Florida State the last few years. Napier's dealing with it at Florida right now. Sark's dealing with it at Texas. It takes the amount of time it takes to implement new culture, new systems, turn things around. Okay, and no matter how bad a fan base wants it to happen overnight, it doesn't change what reality is. If you've got a 24-month rebuild, if you've got a 36-month rebuild, it's going to take that long. And the only way you can change that is to cut corners. And if you cut corners, it's penny wise, pound foolish, and yet people lose all perspective on Saturdays in the fall when it comes to that. And he dealt with it, and a lot of other coaches have dealt with it. But what I started thinking, when I started watching some of that conditioning, when I started watching some of those mat drills that they brought down there to Gainesville, when I started watching the midnight to 2:15 a.m. workouts, when I started watching Urban Meyer try and torch the barn and kill the rats, which in and of itself is probably an HR violation of a statement now, I started to ask myself how much of what he did to weed out the weak would not be allowed now. 50%? 60%, 70%. I mean, Tebow's on camera saying, this was awesome. I loved it. We probably went a little too far. And by modern standards, they probably did. I watch it, though, and there was a great quote. It's a contextual quote, so even if I give it to you now, you'll still be able to enjoy it in its full effect when you watch episode 1. But there was an Urban Meyer, not just a quote, there was an Urban Meyer philosophy that I'm going to treat my stars like stars, and I'm going to treat my crap like crap. The snap is because I had to edit for language, so the kiddos can still listen to the show. Well, you can't tell people that anymore, can you? Producer Jesse got worked up over this. Management walked in. Management stayed here all the way till like 4:30 p.m. today. It was wild. I don't know what was happening. He must have fallen asleep at his desk. So anyway, management's on the way out. He comes in, says, all right, guys, I'll see you later. And he shook our hand, and then he, put hand sanitizer on afterwards. And he said, what are you guys watching? We said, oh, we're doing show prep. We're watching Swamp Kings. What is that? And so we show him. And Jesse said, oh, man, in these PC times, you could never get away with this. And I'm like, welcome to the party, producer Jesse. And he's right. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I would argue it's half and half. It's a little of both. But, man, there used to be times where you could just call a loser. And you could really, you could structure your organization based solely on merit. And there was really no in between. Like, that was one of the things I took away. There was no middle ground. With Florida or many successful organizations, there was no middle ground. You weren't doing pretty good. You were either penthouse or outhouse, and you were treated as such. And the follow-up to that quote, I'm going to treat my stars like stars, I'll treat my crap like crap, is if you want a change in your outcome, change your process, change the results you're giving me. It's really that simple. The Tim Tebow recruitment was the most important recruitment in the history of college football. I cannot overstate, for those of you who are 15 and you're not old enough to remember the impact of Tim Tebow's recruitment. It comes down to Florida and it comes down to Bama. Urban Meyer's lost multiple games his first year. Folks are openly doubting him. They want Steve Spurrier back. Spurrier's at South Carolina, and Florida's like, no, come home. Come home, Dad. Come home. We don't even know who this is. He just came from Utah. He hasn't even fully unpacked his U-Haul. It's not too late. And there's this kid playing for Nice High School down there, and it's Tim Tebow, and he goes on to become like the number one quarterback in the nation, and it comes down to Florida and Alabama, and I am telling you, if Alabama lands him, Mike Shula does good enough to where they don't fire him. Nick Saban never ends up at Alabama. That's one gigantic piece of this puzzle. Gigantic piece number two is if Urban Meyer doesn't land Tim Tebow, knowing the impact player he was, Urban Meyer himself is admitting, I'm probably fired not too long after that if we don't land him. And then part three is like, think about all the other ramifications. He is a keystone recruit because keystone recruits are like keystone species in the wild. A keystone species cannot do anything without the entire ecosystem being affected. Tim Tebow committed to Florida. You got defensive players like Brandon Spikes committing, saying, yeah, I think I want to play with Tebow. How many people's lives were changed? How many future recruiting trajectories were changed towards Gainesville that otherwise wouldn't have gone there if Tebow wasn't there? And then also, it just goes to show you, when you're a keystone recruit, Deshaun Watson was this, I think, for Clemson. When you're a keystone recruit, it doesn't just mean you have 5 stars next to your name. It doesn't just mean you can play. It means people are drawn to you. Certainly eyeballs are drawn to you, but players are drawn to you. And every staff knows when they have one. That's your best recruiter. It's not your D-line coach. It's not your head coach. It's not your strength and conditioning staff. It's not your trophy case. Your keystone recruits are the ones who recruit other players. And then they recruit kids in the next class, even if they never speak to them, just because those kids in the next class say, wherever number 15's playing, yeah, that's where I want to go. I want to go play for that dude. I certainly don't want to play against him. That all happened because of one dude. That all happened because of Tim Tebow. The Tebow recruitment was like a circus, and it wasn't because he was into theatrics. It's a shock to the senses, by the way, when you watch the replay of Tebow committing to Florida, and he's live on SportsCenter on ESPN, and they say, Tim, where are you going to play your college football? Yes, thank you for the opportunity. I'll be playing my college football at the University of Florida. And then it's over, 7.5 seconds in. No hats, no live animals, no cousin taking off a jacket and then taking off another jacket. Different time. And the one other thing from episode 1 that I took away was I think bulletin board material is the most overrated thing in the world. I think external motivation, people doubting you, using disrespect, I think that stuff's so overrated. I think people getting nervous because someone said something on tape that could fuel the other team, and people just chewing their fingernails to the nubs on game week. Oh, I hope we didn't motivate them. It's such garbage. Like Mima always told me, games are won on signing day and games are won in the summer. You do not start to win a game the week of the game. You're not really making wholesale changes because you're hardwiring your team in the spring. Mentally, they're becoming what they're going to become in the spring and summer. And also, you got to get the players, period, on signing day. You're just fine-tuning things in the fall. You're installing a game plan on game week, but you're not developing yourself as a team the week of a game. Like I got Tennessee on Saturday. It's Tuesday. Let me get my guys ready to play Tennessee. Tennessee's about to hang 60 on you if that's when you're getting ready for Tennessee. And at any time you really get a glimpse inside a program, any coach that is worth his salt and honest will tell you, yeah, it's about players and it's about mentality. Anyone who's around athletics tells you that. I think outsiders have not the slightest clue how football games are won. That's when they're won. They're won on signing day, you get the players, and then they're won in spring and summer when you're either beating what you need to beat into them or you're beating them down mentally to the point where they leave. It's not game week. It's not in the fall. It's not when football games are being won. So that's episode 1. I'm through episode 1. I don't know how far you guys are into it, but I've enjoyed it so far. I've heard criticisms. Trust me, I was on the phone right up until showtime. I've heard some criticisms. I need to make it through myself. See, there are some people who have already made it through who are telling me, I don't think they were critical enough. I don't think they dived deep enough into the more negative aspects, of which there are several in this era. These were not choir children. These were guys from all different walks of life that came together and were put in a pressure cooker environment, intentionally designed that way, and they made a really, really good dish. It's just that it came with a little baggage. So I'm going to wait. I'm going to judge for myself. Maybe you guys are right. I'm going to judge for myself.